Many years ago, in a quiet town surrounded by fields and old roads, there lived a man named Samuel. Most people barely noticed him. Samuel lived in a small wooden house at the edge of town. The paint on the walls had faded with time, and the fence around the yard leaned slightly to one side. Every morning, Samuel woke up before sunrise. He walked slowly to the local diner, ordered the same cup of coffee, and sat in the same chair near the window. He wore simple clothes, old shoes, a worn-out jacket that had clearly seen many winters. To most people in town, Samuel looked like a man who had very little. Some believed he was poor. Others thought he had simply failed in life. One afternoon, two young men sitting at the diner began whispering about him. "See that old man?" one of them said quietly. "He's been coming here for years." The other man laughed. "And he still looks like he owns nothing." Samuel heard them, but he didn't say a word. He simply smiled softly and continued drinking his coffee. In the town, people often judged success by what they could see. A big house, a shiny car, expensive clothes. Samuel had none of those things. What they did not know was that Samuel had spent most of his life doing something very different from the rest of them. While others spent their money trying to look successful, Samuel quietly built his future. He worked as a mechanic when he was younger. The pay was modest, but Samuel had a simple habit. Every time he earned money, he kept a small portion for living and another portion for building. At first, the amounts were small, very small. But Samuel believed something many people ignored. Money, when treated with patience, grows slowly but steadily. Instead of buying things to impress people, Samuel bought small pieces of land outside town. The land was cheap. Nobody wanted it at the time. Years later, the town began to grow. New roads appeared. New houses were built. The land Samuel bought quietly became valuable, but Samuel never changed the way he lived. He still wore simple clothes. He still drank coffee at the same diner. He still lived in the same small house, because Samuel had learned something early in life that most people never understand. Looking rich and being rich are two very different things. One evening, the owner of the diner sat beside him and asked a question. "Samuel, why do you live so simply?" Samuel looked out the window for a moment before answering. "Because peace is cheaper than appearances," the owner laughed softly. "That sounds like something a philosopher would say." Samuel smiled. "Maybe. But it's also something a patient man learns." Years passed. The town continued to grow. New buildings appeared. Businesses opened. And the land Samuel had quietly purchased over decades became worth more and more. But very few people knew. Samuel never spoke about it. He never bragged. He never showed signs of wealth. To the town, he was simply the quiet man with old shoes who drank coffee every morning. One winter morning, Samuel did not come to the diner. At first, no one noticed, but days passed, then weeks. Eventually, the town learned that Samuel had passed away quietly in his sleep. The news spread slowly. A few neighbors attended his small funeral. People spoke about how quiet he had been, how simple his life looked, how little he seemed to own. But several weeks later, something surprising happened. A lawyer arrived in town. He began meeting with several local officials. Soon people discovered something that stunned the entire community. Samuel had quietly owned large portions of the land surrounding the town. Fields properties, roadside plots, land that was now worth a small fortune. The quiet man many believed was poor had quietly become the wealthiest man in the area. The two young men who once laughed at him sat in the diner one afternoon speaking about it. "I never understood him," one of them said. "He could have lived like a king." The other man shook his head slowly. Maybe he already did, because Samuel understood something that many people spend their entire lives chasing. Wealth is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it wears old shoes. Sometimes it drinks coffee in the same small diner every morning. And sometimes the richest person in the room is the one nobody notices. If this story gave you something to think about, subscribe to Old Wisdom for more quiet lessons about life, money, and the choices that shape our future.